Hi, today I'm going to show you how to put together the large ink pad holder from Simply Crafty SVGs. So we're just going to jump right in. This is the lid, and you can see I put the panels on. I just centered them on the sides of the lid and the center of the top. And what we're going to do is assemble it. It's quite simple. We're just going to glue these little side tabs here. We're going to fold them down and glue them to the adjacent sides. We'll do that for all four. I am using, for those that are wondering what kind of paper I'm using a Cricut craft board, which is a little thicker than a cardstock. But you could get away with doing 80-pound or like a American Craft or textured paper cardstock. As far as chipboard goes, chipboard's a little bit different to work with. If you do want to modify the file, you could use chipboard, but there are some really tight allowances for the fit of the actual pads. So just be aware that if you add thickness to the box, you may have to enlarge it slightly. So as you can tell, I'm going from corner to corner, and I'm lining up the adjacent edge to the tab fold. I'm trying to get a clothespin to hold it. When you're working with something a little bit thicker, like this craft board I'm using, it is helpful to get something to hold the tabs in place until they dry, because it's a little thicker, so it doesn't bend as easily, and it tends to pull away quicker if you don't hold it long enough. So just make sure you understand the type of glue you're using, and to hold it long enough or apply enough pressure so it's secure before you go on to the next tab. So for this one, I'm using clothespins. If you do like this project and others, please give us a little thumbs up down there, or subscribe. I would truly appreciate it. Thanks. So we're going to finish up this last one. Oh, and if you're wondering how I did that, or if I bought that paper, it actually was just black and white, and I used distress oxides to blend the rainbow. So for all the panels, I did each one individually. It took some time, but I like the effect. I'm not the best at blending, but it looks good to me. So there's the lid. Again, with this project, you could use without the lid. You'll see pictures that can just stand up on its side, but I intend to travel with it, so I'll open it most of the time when I'm not traveling, put it on my desk, but then I'll put the lid on to travel, or if I need to clean up my craft room, like we do that, right? So in this step, I'm putting on the panels for the actual box. So when you place the panel down, you just want to center it. There should be an edge all the way around. And we'll just do that on all four sides. So these are the two sides that will be glued onto the larger piece. And you will need, for this design, at least 3 12 by 12 cardstock, or if you want to do something like craft board. Again, if you decide to go with something like poster board, it's a little bit thicker, so you may have to enlarge it a little bit. Otherwise, the inks may not fit in there. I haven't tried it, so it's just a warning. But you could get away with using something like a American Crafts textured cardstock, and the reason I say that is these ink pads are really not that heavy. So these are designed for the square distress oxides and distressed inks, and they really are not that heavy. So, but when we get to the next step, I did use a different paper for the box. So I used a craft board for the actual box to give it a little bit more structural strength, I should say. But when it came to these inserts, I actually doubled them up with 65-pound Recollections of craft paper. So you could do it if you had at least a thicker textured cardstock. You wouldn't have to do this, but because I decided I wanted to have the craft paper look, I already put together these. There are 5 inserts that look like this, and I cut out 10. And then I carefully glue them together. So you want to line them up, make sure they're lined up perfectly, or the best you can get, and then apply pressure. I didn't put glue on the tabs yet, so I just glued the middle piece first. And then once that was flat enough, it might have little ripples because this is what I didn't really intend you to glue papers together, but if you needed to, I wanted to show you how to do it. But you could use, I used on my very first box I did like this, I used just a Nina cardstock. It was 110 pounds. Even the American Craft textured would have been heavy duty enough to hold up the pads. So it's giving you a little bit more information. And if there's a little ripple in it, you're not going to see it anyways if you do what I'm doing. For this one, I do say you need to, so the cut file only has 5 of the inserts on the right, and the cut file has 2 of these, and that's because we want to give strength to that middle piece. So regardless of what you're using, you want to cut out 2 of these. And you're just going to glue them together, and be careful about getting glue near those little open cuts, because that's how we're going to slide it down. So you want to kind of put the tabs opposite. As you can see, they're folding opposite. Line them up, and I do that by kind of pushing down on the table, make sure they're centered, and then making sure that those pretty much the gaps, it's lined up with the cut lines there. And then you're not going to glue the side tabs like we did earlier. Those will be glued to the box once we get it together. And I'll show you an example as we get partway through the box. But those are just going to glue against the sides of the box inside. And this is what it looks like right there. That's that little middle piece. And then these are the 5 pieces that go across, to give you an idea. So we're going to bring out the box again, and we're not going to put it all the way together. We want to partially put it together, so it'll be easier for us to put the inserts. So we're only going to add that one side. So we're going to add glue to this tab, and we're going to overlap the left, or the right edge, I'm sorry, of that larger piece. We're going to center it, make sure it's centered, and you want to make sure that edge is sitting in the inside tab fold. And you see I folded it up to help me. And then I'm just making sure it's good and secure before I go to the next step here. Then we're going to glue these 2 side tabs to that front piece, aligning that edge with the tab fold, making that corner, and we'll do that on the other side as well. So we're going to partially put this together so we can put those little inserts in. If you had the whole box together already, it makes it more difficult to put them in there. The first time I did this, you know, I do assemble things multiple times. I did that, and it was way more difficult to reach in. So this will make it easier. And you want to make sure these are good and dry before you move on. So if you need to spend the time to apply pressure against it, so against the table or something, just make sure these are good and secure before you go to the next step. So next will be those 5 inserts that I doubled up. So you see how the tabs are pushed downwards? That's our spacing mechanism. So as you glue them on, you're going to make sure that the edges of the tabs align with the next insert. So we'll do the first one, then you'll see how it goes. And I would probably watch this before you did it, A lot of people watch it while they're doing it, but I would watch it. So we're going to put it in like that. You see how the ends of the tab will line up to, we'll call it the front of the box, even though it could be the front or side. It could be the side. Since the glue came out really quick, I had to thin it out with my fingers, and then you can see that it's on both tabs. So now we're going to line up the end of the tab to the front of the box and making sure that it's also touching the bottom. This is really important for spacing, so you need to make sure that you pay attention, and not really pay attention, but really make sure that each insert goes in touching the previous insert at this point. So you have to start out well here, otherwise you won't have enough space for the last ink. So don't worry about the bowing. I know it looks funny, but it'll work itself out in the end. I didn't want it too tight, because if I made the piece a little bit bigger, the tabs would pull away a little bit from the side. So we had to find a good alternative. So right now you see that I'm kind of placing it in there to show you where it goes. And actually, if it went under a little bit, you see how the edges of the previous insert are kind of raised a little bit. If you went just a smidgen under that, it would be okay. The issue is going to be if you don't have enough space, if you go too far away from it. So the end of this tab needs to at least touch the previous insert. So I'm flipping it over so I can get it in the right position. So to show you, you can see how it kind of flips down. You can just have one side flip down so the glue doesn't get everywhere. Once you get that in place, go to the other side, do the same thing. Honestly, you could have put cut lines in here to help you guide it, but it would have been hard to see. So this is the best way that I could find. And if there's a little glue on the side, I wouldn't worry too much about it. You're not going to see it. So here's how the middle insert will go in, just to give you an idea. So I'm going to put it on these two pieces. It's going to kind of part the cut on the insert. And then we're going to slide it down. And it'll slide down, and then it'll go over the bottom. You'll see how it goes on. And there's ways to adjust it. That's the nice thing about paper. So that's what we're trying to get to. You see that slides right in. So I'm going to pull it out. Sometimes I think it's better if you see in progress so you understand how it goes together. This is the first time that I've done something like this. I mean, a long time ago I did, but for me to design one. So I hope it works for you. Like I said, I did two versions, this one and a first version, and the first one's holding up even though I didn't use the best paper. So let's just be honest, you're not going to move this around a lot. So the only thing, a lot of people, unless you travel with it, it'll just be on your desk. So you can see how I put glue on both tabs, but I just kind of flipped it back to be able to apply pressure and line it up the way I need. Again, concentrating on making sure that the end of the tab lines up to the previous insert. And then I'm just kind of pushing it down to make sure also that it's as square with the box as possible on the bottom. Really, if it's off a little bit, it shouldn't hurt. The biggest thing is going to be the insert spacing. And I'm telling you that again and again because you can get to the last one and then nothing will fit. So I'm just spreading out that glue a little bit. So this one was a little tight at the end because I used the double thickness of the cardstock. Since I only had a 65-pound weight craft paper, I wanted to make sure I doubled it up for longevity purposes. And get it good and strong in the middle there. And if you didn't want to use glue, another alternative would be like a red line tape. I can't, I know a lot of people have it, but it's a heavy duty double-sided tape. Just if you do use that kind of thing, it just makes it a little bit more difficult to make adjustments, because as soon as it hits, the tape hits the two pieces of material that's taped to, it just sticks. So for me, because I'm not so eloquent at doing what I do sometimes, I tend to have some difficulty with tape, but it would be a good application for this one because it's nice and sturdy, especially that really heavy duty double-sided. But I need to be able to have a little give just in case I mess up, so it allows me to do some adjustments when I use liquid glue. And here's that last piece. And you see they're all kind of wonky in there, but again, it all kind of space with that last piece. And that's the nice thing about paper. It does move around. So even if it looks all kind of funky, and I'm just making sure that it's fitting in that top piece, which it does. So we're going to put this in. Now this is not like the simplest to go in. So I would go from left to right or right to left, whatever. Start on one side, flip those tabs kind of down so they're not in your way. I'm going to line it up first. I want to make sure that I line up those 5 inserts so I'm getting that middle inserts, all the slots are over it, and then I'll make sure I gently press it down so it lines up to the slot. The slots are lining up on each piece basically, because it should push almost all the way down. So you can see how it's doing that. So you want it to go below the edge of the box, so it should go down further, so it shouldn't be sticking up at all. But I'm pulling it out a little bit, so now that you have it set in place, you want to pull it out a little bit so we can glue that one side, the side to the, I'm calling it the front of the box. Now, I wouldn't recommend, I showed doing it a different way, but you could put a little glue in there, but you're going to have to reach in and use a tool to spread it, or your finger. So I use my finger to spread it all the way out. So reach in to spread the glue. Then we'll have to press it down again. This is where it's handy to have the little glue pads too, the little ink pads nearby, because I'm pushing it down, and for spacing, I'm just putting one in there. You can put 2 if you have 2 of them. I just want to make sure it's centered. You could eye it too. I mean, as long as you can kind of eye it. And then I'm going to press them down a little bit. So I want to make sure it's kind of in place before I really put my final pressure on it. You don't want to leave those in, else they will glue to the bottom. So you need to pull those glue pads out if you do that. Do it that way, because it'll actually glue in the pads. Leak out and glue the pads. So I'm just going to reach in and apply pressure against those. Now, to me, that was one of the hardest parts of the whole project, other than the inserts and just concentrating. But the inserts are really not that bad. But that one is just the final placement, because it is critical. And you can see that the spacing's fine, and we'll finish the top part in a minute here. So I'm just making sure that's good and pushed down. Then we'll put that last panel on, and then glue it to these 3 tabs. So first we want to glue it with that long tab. So we're going to add glue to that. You'll see it goes up the side. We're going to add glue to this tab, and then we're going to line up the bottom edge of that box to the inside tab fold of this tab. And just make sure it's centered. I'll just fold it up a little bit and push in, making sure that it's good in there. Oops, and if it slid off here. It's my blooper. So before I slid it, I just have to make sure it's nice and secure, but I wanted to rotate it, but it moved when I rotated it. So I'm just reaching in to apply pressure on that tab. And then what we'll go ahead and glue the remaining side tabs inward. We're going to push them in and glue them to this side that will fold up. So we're going to add glue to all three of these, or it really is 4 tabs, but the side tabs and that big double middle tab. Now I'm using a little bit more glue than I normally would with regular cardstock because I am using this thicker material. So as I fold it over, I'm just making sure it's lined up properly on the edges. So I start with one side, and then I go to the other side first, and then I'll finish with the middle. So I put enough glue there so I had a little time to, give time to be able to place these. So that was just to help me place them. If you wanted to use a ruler, you could do that too. I just wanted to make sure I was centering it properly. I'm assuming anybody that has is making this box has these on hand, but if you don't, it's a little bit, about 3.1 inches, I believe. Each of these ink pads are 3 inches square, I believe. I have to double check that. Anyways, I'll have that in the notes of the product. But we want to make sure this is good and dry before you put things in there, obviously. But I put it on the bottom. I just flipped it over because that's what side I already did. So I'm just going to show you how they all fit. So one thing with this box, you can store these inks on the side. I read about them. So if you're using any of the distress oxides or distress inks, they will store in the side without a problem. That's okay per Ranger and Tim Holtz if you watch Tim Holtz videos. But you can also store them upright too. So I intend to use mine mostly like that on the side. Or you can just store them like this on your table. It's up to you. And then the only other optional thing we have is to add a little tag. I just included a tag. It doesn't say anything, but I added distress oxides on mine because that's what's in my box. And then you could just place it anywhere, and I chose to put it on my lid. Or you don't put anything. I also labeled each of the sides of my inks so I know what the color is before I pull it out. So I ended up not putting it there, but I was trying to think about where I was going to put it. But since it's going to be upright a lot of the time, I didn't want it there. So I ended up with the lid. So when you're not using this, the actual inks, you could actually store the box away on the shelf or something like that, or take it on the road like I intend to do periodically. The nice thing about this box is you could also use this as a gift box without the inserts. So there it is. So we're just going to add the lid so you can see how the lid slides on. Nice and snug. And then of course you could put the lid on the bottom. You could just slide it underneath the bottom when you don't have it on. And then I intend to store it like this, sideways, upwards. I hope you enjoyed this project. I had fun making it, and I look forward to using it as well. Thank you so much for watching.